Hi, this is 50/50, real estate podcast for the common man, where we talk about selling, buying, and investing in real estate. We aren't baffling you with BS. We're dazzling you with brilliance. We're not telling you how to become a millionaire. We're telling you stories, the truth, and the information no one is talking about. So sit back, listen, laugh, and enjoy 50/50, real estate podcast for the common man.
Hey everybody, JD here. Hope you're looking good and feeling fine. Hope you had a great weekend with friends, families, and relatives. We're going to be discussing something here that really scares me quite a lot. I don't think a lot of mortgage companies, the government, financial institutions, Wall Street, actually even are aware of this. I think looking at it relatively pretty close, it really scares the living daylights out of me, and I'm going to discuss something that I just discovered and looked into it a little bit more thoroughly and realized that the government is kind of, I don't know if they are aware of it, or if they are, it's the biggest con since Bernie Madoff and makes Bernie Madoff look like a kid. Or maybe they're just naive and they're just not really even aware of it. So, like I said, if this is true, it will be pretty much a huge financial crash in the United States. It'll make the crash of 2008 look like small potatoes. And let me explain. I'll explain a little bit. I mean, it's kind of old news, but if you're not really familiar with what happened in 2008, is that what had happened is they were trying to make homes more affordable. And what happened is that the government just said, hey, look it, we will insure these types of loans, and just loosen up your loan standards because we wanted to make homes way more affordable. So what happens is a lot of the banks started giving out what they call liar loans. And what that was is, and it really totally surprised me because I was selling quite a lot of real estate back then. But when it came to be, I started talking to my mortgage person that I've been working with for years. And I said, now, wait a minute. I don't understand. You're saying that I can get somebody a loan with no down payment, no income, and they're not even going to check the credit? And he said yes. And I just, what, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. And he goes, well, that's the guidelines now, and that's where the mortgage companies are doing. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the mortgage insurance companies will insure these loans. And I said, this is just the craziest thing I've ever heard of. So what happened is the real estate market became higher and higher and higher. And I mean, some of it was just kind of like today. It was so overinflated, nothing made sense. And people were buying homes. I mean, I had literally people who had never invested in real estate, had no job and no money down, and they were buying kind of fix and flips. And the interest rates were a lot higher because there was a lot more risk to the lender. And they were getting what they call the hard money loans, and they didn't need a down payment, closing costs, or they didn't even verify their employment or anything like this. And it was the most craziest thing I've ever saw. And that's just kind of the way it was. Well, what has happened back then is they were giving so many loans and they were called liar loans, that they were just garbage loans, total garbage loans. And if you ever saw a movie called The Big Short, it was how a guy named Michael Berry kind of discovered how the whole entire real estate economy was just going to tank because the whole real estate and economy was built up on these just bad liar loans. Where people couldn't really afford homes. They were adjustable rate mortgages. They were what they called teaser rates. So let's say interest rates were like 5%. They said, well, we'll give you a 2% interest rate for 5 years, and then it'll adjust. So a lot of people went in, figured, hey, if I buy a home and I don't need no money, no credit, no job, hey, and I can live in a house for 3 or 5 years. And, if it doesn't work out, I'll just give the house to the bank. But boy, I really lived in a really nice house for a long time, and I'd be renting anyway. So a lot of the people just, they went out, they bought a home, and a lot of it was adjustable rate mortgages. And after about 3, 4, 5 years, a lot of the rates adjusted, and their house payment went from like $800 to $2,100, and they just couldn't afford it, and they all just kind of walked away. Well, if you looked at The Big Short, what was really interesting is Michael Berry kind of discovered that everything was built on these liar loans, bad loans, subprime mortgages that were just garbage loans. But what was happening is when all these loans were made, a lot of the mortgage companies would just sell them off. And if you look at it, if you've ever had a loan, a lot of times you get a loan, and after maybe a year or two, sometimes when you close within the next month, it'll say your loan has been sold off to, maybe you went to, I say, let's create a name, Winding Mortgage Company, and Winding Mortgage Company is selling it to Guy Mortgage Company. And the reason why they do that is because when you get a loan, the mortgage is a debt to you because you owe money. But it's an asset to the mortgage companies, and those assets could be sold. And they're called kind of mortgage-backed securities because it's a security backed by a mortgage backed by real estate. So what a lot of people did back then in 2008 when the whole market fell is they gathered up all these mortgages, and a lot of them were really decent mortgages, but a lot of them were garbage. So I guess a good way of, explaining it is, let's say you had, some steak, and you just couldn't sell the steak. But the steak hasn't really gotten bad. I mean, it's still eatable, it's still decent, but it's kind of aged a little bit, and you really can't sell it as steak. So what you do is you cook up the steak, you cut it in little bits, and then you put it in the soup, and you make soup out of the steak. Well, that's kind of what they were doing. They had these bad loans, and they were just garbage loans. And what they were doing is they were putting it together with decent loans, kind of hiding it behind decent loans, and they were selling them as mortgage-backed securities. And Wall Street and big huge investors were selling them. A lot of pension funds were buying them. Countries were buying mortgage-backed securities, insurance companies, investment companies, and so on and so forth. And what had happened is this Michael Berry discovered that the whole economy is built on these bad, terrible ugly loans. And he predicted the whole real estate market was just going to collapse. And when the real estate market collapsed, the whole economy was collapsed. And he did what they call, he shorted the stock. Now, I am not a financial advisor, but I'm not giving any financial advice, but I'm giving you a little bit of information. And what shorting the stock is, I mean, it gets a lot more complicated, but I'll just kind of tell you how it is in layman's terms. Is, let's say, we're going to say that Apple, just everybody kind of knows Apple, and Apple is selling one share of their stock for $100,000. Excuse me, not $100,000. Let's say $100, okay, to make it easier. And you look at the Apple report, and you go deep inside of Apple, and you say, wow, wait a minute. Boy, it looks like they're just not selling iPhones and iPads and Macs that much this year. Matter of fact, the shortage, they can't get the supplies. The people just aren't interested as much as they were about Apple products. And boy, they're just going to have a real bad year. And their stock is going to pretty much plummet. So what you do is you go and you say to investors and people who stock brokers and so on and so forth, you say, look, I would like to short an Apple stock. And some of these investors and big hedge funds and so on and so forth say, okay, well, if you want to short an Apple stock, we'll loan you, let's say, one stock for $100, but we want a premium. We want 1% every month, or 1% of what we loan you every year. So until we get that share back, that Apple share back, we're going to be charging you a fee and so on. So you better be darn sure that that Apple stock is going to go down, or you could file bankruptcy and just lose everything. So let's say that Apple stock, you say, okay, I'll go for it, and you get that Apple stock for the current rate of $100, and you sell it for $100. But you're gambling that maybe in a month, or in a few months, or a short amount of time, that same stock is going to only be worth $50. So let's say for sure that, wow, if we wait a month or two, that stock's going to be worth $50, but we're still going to have to pay maybe 1% premium every month until we can give the stock back. So it's a real big risk. But it really worked out for the Michael Burry, because everybody thought he was crazy, because the not the interest rates, but the housing market was just going through the roof. So can you imagine, everybody looking at Apple and saying, "Oh, are you kidding? Apple's never going to go down. It's going to go up, man. It'd be a great product. People are buying them, and so on and so forth." But you've done so much research, you just know that it's untrue, but all the hype is saying, oh, Apple's the best thing since sliced bread. So you go and you borrow one share of Apple at $100, and everybody thinks you're out of your mind. So they think, okay, and you're going to pay us 1% a month, we'll do it all day long. And they loan you the one share. Like I said, you sell it for $100. And then let's say 2 weeks later, that share goes down to $50. Well, now you buy the share back for $50 and you give it back to the person that you borrowed it from, plus that premium. And you made, to make it simple, $50 profit. Well, that's kind of what Michael Berry did, but it wasn't, that. He bought like huge mortgage backed securities and mortgage trades, and everybody thought he was crazy. So he bought like $100 million of real estate backed securities, and was going to short them to say, the whole market's going to go down, and I can sell these for 100 million, and within a short amount of time, I'll be able to buy these back for 50, pennies on the dollar, like 10 million, and I can make my investors who invested in him, millions and millions of dollars. Well, it all came out to be true, and the guy made millions for himself and millions for for his investors. But if it didn't, the guy would have filed bankruptcy, and all his investors would have lost. It would have been really, really ugly. And he's noted as a really, really just a phenomenal investor, and you can read about him. But so that's what the Big Short is, and he just bet that the whole real estate economy was going to go down the tubes because of bad loans. Well, fast forward now. I am not a Michael Berry, and I don't play one on TV, but I'm looking at things, and I'm kind of understanding a little bit about shorting stocks and things along that lines, and the whole economy and mortgage, backed securities, and how companies are selling them, and so on and so forth. And it kind of dawned on me that the government kind of ran a scam. I know they didn't intentionally do it, and I know it's probably not a conspiracy theory, but it's really, really ugly, and it really scares the living daylights out of me. Let me explain. And I would suggest you look at it really closely. If you have any financial advisors or investors that you have, or you're a financial advisor or an investor, and you look into this, maybe you might come into the same conclusion that I did. Well, when the pandemic hit, and they had to close down the entire economy, the government realized that the whole entire economy would have collapsed. The United States would have collapsed. The whole financial economy would have collapsed. So what they did is they lowered the interest rates to nothing, zero, I think it was. And they said to a lot of the mortgage companies that borrow from the government, you can borrow, millions and billions of dollars for nothing. Interest rates would be nothing. So the mortgage companies said, okay, and that's why the interest rates went down to like 3%, 2.5%, because they were, getting all this money from the government and at pretty much no interest. Well, everybody back, in 2020, 2021, and beginning of 2022, they said, wow, wait a minute, we can get this cheap money. So a lot of the people were borrowing money at 2-3% and putting it in the stock market and getting 10, 15, 20%, making a ton of money. But a lot of the people were also saying, look, we can borrow money and cheap money, and we can buy real estate. So a lot of big corporations were buying huge amount of homes. Some of these corporations went in and bought like whole blocks and whole subdivisions from builders, and just came in with cash, and they were backed up by a lot of the Wall Street, big money from Wall Street, and saying, look it, we're borrowing money at 3%, but these houses are going up 10, 15, 20, 30% a year. We're buying all these houses and maybe rent them out for a year. We'll make some good income there, and then in a year or two we'll sell these and make a fortune, make 20%, 30%. So they were doing that, and then everybody else kind of jumped on the bandwagon, and tons and tons and tons of people just said, oh, interest rates are low, why should we pay rent? We can go out and buy homes for close to what we're paying rent, and these are the lowest interest rates in history. Let's go out. So homes started going up, 10, 15, 20, 30%. Matter of fact, sometimes people were even overbidding $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 over what the asking price was. So let's look at a lot of these homes were overinflated. There was so demand to it. The demand basically inflated these homes so high they weren't worth what they were selling for. I mean, you would go out and you would see a house that was $300,000, and the house is selling for $500,000. You go, are they kidding me? $500,000 for a house? That house maybe worth $300,000. But people didn't care. All they cared is, hey, look, I'm getting this low interest rate and I can afford a home. And who cares if the house is $200,000 over what it should be? I'm getting the interest rate. It would be like going into a car lot and you're buying a, I don't know, Maserati for $100,000. Okay. And you just, at a normal interest rate, you wouldn't even think of it. You couldn't even afford it. But then the guy says, well, I can give you this Maserati for an interest rate of 1% over the next 30 years, and all it's going to cost you is $150 a month. Well, you go, wow, I can write a Maserati for $150 a month. Okay, I'll jump on it. Well, you're not caring about what the price of that Maserati is. All you care is you can afford a house payment. Well, that's kind of what was going on for the past 3 or 4 years. Is nobody was really caring about what the value of the home was. All they care is, oh, this is like the lowest interest rates in history. I can hopefully afford these payments. And wow, this is great. So the housing market went up 20, 30, 40%, overinflated. Everybody who's in any financial business or real estate will say these are overinflated homes. But then the argument was, well, this is totally different than 2008. Totally different. Because you're not giving LIA loans out. You're not, these people have to qualify. They need a down payment. They need a good job. They need great credit scores. And, they need an appraisal. And so there's no way that it's happening like it happened in 2008. But I'm saying, wait a minute. It is, because what was happening is the housing started rising and rising and rising and rising and rising. They were incredibly crazy prices. And the appraisers were just looking at what was going on and saying, wow, this guy, he bought a home for $400,000. So there's a comp. And there's another guy that bought a $400,000 comp. And then, and so this house that JD's buying, it's worth 400, and it just went up and up and up and up and up and up and up. I mean, there is no way in a world, and this is was happening with people buying a $400,000 home. living it for less than a year and selling for $100,000 more a year later. That's crazy. Nobody does that. Usually, on an average market, might go up 3 to 5%. They don't go up 30, 40, 50% in 1 year. So it's just an insane, overinflated, smoke and mirrors market. And it was all caused by the government cheap money. The government's cheap money. So the housing market overinflated, right? And there's these overinflated mortgages. It's kind of like the 2008 housing market, except that they're not backed by liar loans and crazy ninja loans and whatever you want to call them. They're backed by overinflated cheap money that overinflated the market. Okay, so what the government said is, look at just kind of like what happened at Wall Street in 2008. Is they said, we're going to give cheap money, but you guys don't have to worry. The government will buy mortgage backed securities back. So mortgage companies started loaning money, and selling them all. And the government was buying all these mortgages back. So they were giving really cheap interest rates, giving the mortgages, giving that to the mortgage company. The mortgage company was loaning money, and then they were selling them all off, and the government was buying back. Matter of fact, the government was buying something like $40 billion worth of mortgage-backed securities in 1 month. So now fast forward, they purchased something like $6 trillion worth of mortgage-backed securities. And that kind of stimulated the economy, got everybody to buy. The economy slowly started getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And then it started, things started getting higher and higher and higher in prices because everything was so cheap money that we had high inflation now. Gas is up, food is up, everything is up. We had like 5 to 6, 8% inflation rate. So now what the government is saying is, hey, wait a minute, this has got out of half. We've got to raise the interest rates now. So they raised them to 5.5, 5.25. Who knows? Maybe middle of summer it's going to be 6.25 to really, really, really slow down the economy and the prices from escalating and so on. They've done that, and it's really slowed down the housing market. I mean, I've seen houses in my area that last year would have been listed for $720, now listed for like, I'd say $650, and they're still a little bit too high. Well, now the mortgage company, now the government is saying, we're not going to buy any mortgages anymore. We're not going to buy any mortgage-backed securities and so on. What we're going to do is we're going to bundle up everything we have, and we're just going to sell them. We're going to get rid of them. And they've already sold something like $1.2 trillion worth of all the mortgages that they had bought. And they're going to sell them to Wall Street and investment firms and probably other governments and pension funds or whoever wants to buy these mortgage-backed securities. Now, here's where I say this is going to be really ugly, and I don't think anybody has a clue what's going on, and it's going to be another big, huge fall in the economy. It's going to be a massive recession, and the whole economy is going to go down the tubes. Now, look into this, because here's why I say it gets really scary. If all these mortgages that the government purchased were all based on a false economy on an interest rate that was just falsely put to stimulate an economy through a pandemic, which hasn't been around for 150 years, and probably another pandemic isn't going to go for another, probably, hopefully, 100 years. We won't have another pandemic. Then the whole economy was false. The government made false money, gave people money to stimulate the economy, made a insane low interest rates. The housing market rose to insane rates, overinflated, and they bought all these mortgages that were overinflated. So yeah, they went liar loans backed up by no credit, bad credit, so great. They were backed up by good credit, but overinflated garbage loans. So the loan is really garbage because it isn't built on a value of what that house is worth. It's garbage because it was built by an overinflated market with a false interest rate that the economy created. So now the government is selling off all these mortgages and they're overinflated. They're just garbage because here's what happens. If the economy goes down and people start laying off and so on and so forth, they're going to try to sell these homes, right? A loss of job, economy goes down, people start laying off, things are starting to happen. The economy is starting to slow down. It's starting to get kind of ugly out there. And what happened is these people won't be able to sell their homes, right? They might have to do short sales, or they're just going to walk away. Well, all these mortgages that the government had that sold it to Wall Street, investors, pension funds, countries, they're going to be stuck with a whole ton of mortgages that all fall apart and become ugly mortgages because they're backed by false housing market that was overinflated to begin with. So that's where the ugliness is. Now, here's another ugly statement, and it came out in the news, and I said, oh, is anybody even seeing this? I mean, it's such a con job. I can't even believe it. They said, hey, look at the economy is getting better. The prices are stable, and they're not going up as high. But when you look, there's people laying off a lot of people, so the job market isn't as strong as it is. Yeah, it's strong because it's a summer, but those are temporary jobs. I mean, you could go back and say, hey, look, in May and June, everybody hires for the summer for gardening and movie theaters and maybe forestry service or amusement parks. And then as we get back to fall, everybody lays off. So they're temporary jobs. But what's happening is they're saying, oh, the prices are kind of stable. The prices are stable, so it's a really good market. No, it isn't. What's happening, and I'm like, are these people the stupidest people that ever walked the earth? Is they're laying off people and they're using the money that they're saving laying off people to basically not raise their prices. So when the government says, oh, prices are stable and everything is great, that would be great if it's like, wow, look at this, great. There's great jobs being produced and they're hiring a ton of people. They're not hiring hardly anybody. Matter of fact, they're laying off people because of the fact they're trying to save as much money as they can so they don't have to raise their prices, because they know if they raise their prices, nobody's going to buy it. It's just going to increase the inflation rate and so on. But they try to convince you that, hey, everything's stabilizing now and everything's wonderful because prices aren't rising. Yeah, tell that to people who buy gas. Tell that to people who are buying groceries and so on. And yeah, even if they are finally stabilizing, that's great, but look at all the people that maybe their hours are being cut, or they're not working full time anymore, things along that lines, and then tell me everything is wonderful and so on. So, like I said, I hope this doesn't happen, but I think once the interest rates go up and people start losing their jobs and people not buying homes and people walking away from all their houses like they did around 2008, and all these mortgage-backed securities the government all bought, when the market was going through the roof, 10, 20, 30, 40%, and they're selling them all off. And like I said, they just sold $1.2 trillion. And then all these people who buy them are holding these ugly, worthless mortgage-backed securities on overinflated houses with overinflated mortgages. It's going to be really, really, really ugly big time, and the whole economy is going to tank just like 2008. So folks, like I said, look into it. You'll be totally surprised. Do your own research and so on, and tell me if you come up with the same conclusion, because nobody's saying this. The stock market isn't talking about it. Investments are not talking about it. YouTube, major investors on YouTube aren't talking about it. The news isn't talking about it, and I don't even think they know, and I don't even think the government realizes what's going on. They're just thinking, hey, we stimulated the economy, we bought all these mortgage-backed securities, so people would give loans, and now we're going to just unload them, and boy, they're really good loans, and the AAAs and so on and so forth. They're not looking at, but all these loans, that the houses that people bought should have been 300, not 500 or 600, and there's no value in it. The value is just in the interest rate, and that's why the loan is there. The value isn't in the house, and when people try to sell the house and they can't, and they walk away from it, it's gonna be really, really, really ugly, folks. So, folks, thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate it, and like I said, look in it, do your own research, but guys, I would protect yourself right now as any way you can, because it's coming, and I don't think anybody really, really sees it. All right, thank you very much, folks. Have a good week, and I'll try to get with you next week. Bye for now.
We hope you enjoyed the show, Real Estate for the Common Man. Please follow us or subscribe. Tell your friends, neighbors, relatives, and coworkers about us. We're on all your major podcast apps: Amazon, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and iTunes. If you can't remember all that, just Google it, or have your friends Google Real Estate for the Common Man, and it will come up. Again, we thank you very much for your time, and hopefully you enjoyed the show. Hey, if you live in Colorado Springs and want to buy or sell a home, you can look us up at soldrealestatecompany.com as in I sold a home. Again, thank you very much. Have a very good week, and we'll see you next Monday. Bye for now.